Oh, I guess we are. No, we're not. Yes, we are. It says live. It just took a little longer. We're on a delay. I don't know. Internet's slow. Welcome to another day in the Milky Way, everybody. Yep, I'm watching it on the other screen, and I'm like, it's not saying live. And then all of a sudden, the thing pops up, and the little counter's already counting. I'm like, huh. Well, that's weird. Oh, well, we're using StreamYard today because we got a lot of pictures to show you. And tonight we got a great show for you. So back on the road with the Where We At, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show with my co-host Lucky Stone and my special guest Dalibor Suchy. Thank you for coming.
Pleased to be here.
And we're going to be talking about Druids tonight. Why are we talking about Druids? Because tomorrow you're all going to go over to Nina the Mystics, and you're going to tune in, like it or not, and we're going to do this book right here, Horns of the Goddess, and basically it's Dolores Cannon. She's channeling, and it's kind of about the Druids back in the day. I'll just read a little bit. This book is about the past lives of three of these volunteers who went back to the time of the Druids, and were giving information about how it was to live during this time and the difficulties that were experienced while trying to live with the faith of Mother Earth. The Inquisition was always lurking around trying to find these special groups, and they were not of their religion. They were trying to be forced or them to reveal information about their beliefs, their practices. The Inquisition believed that these special groups had powers and too much influence on regular people. So tonight we're gonna dive into who were the Druids, why did they have that power, what were their special influences, where did they come from, and where did they go? Dalibor, you know anything about the Druids?
Well, the Druids were like the upper class of Celtic society. And what was Celtic society? Well, those were the Celts or Celts, depending on which pronunciation you choose. And they pretty much inhabited all of Europe, mostly Central Europe, but there were also pockets of them in Central Anatolia or Turkey, southern Spain, and more or less in the area of like where I live, which is Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland, and so on. Generally, it's accepted by archaeologists that most of them came from the east and moved to the west. And as Romanization started, which was around for this part of the continent around 500 AD, they kept getting moved more and more westward. The presumption here is that they were avoiding the Romans because the Romans were also Christianizing the continent, as epitomized in the case of my country, Czech Republic, uh, the um, the activities of Cyril and Methodius in the 800s, where more and more of these Celtic people or Celtic people started moving westward. And uh, uh, to this day, the greatest concentration of Celtic people is the westernmost point of France, which would be like Rochelle, most part of England, which would be Wales or Cornwall. Uh, so today, that's where they're most concentrated. The rest of England, and also Scotland and Ireland, of course, the rest of England being populated by people that came from Denmark for the most part. So, among the oldest archaeological finds that you'll find in my country, which is Czech Republic, would be the Celtic people, even though it's been inhabited continuously for the last 25,000 years. So, in other words, they definitely made their own contribution to our society, not only their religion, because we pretty much had the same religion as the Celtic or Celtic people, which was polytheistic, nature based. We had a sort of a trinity, which was two male gods and a female goddess, Svaro, Veles, and Jiva. And basically, that was also formed by the Celtic tradition where they worshipped various deities depending on the location. So, for example, the Anatolian Celts would have worshipped a different set of gods than, for example, the Central European Celts did.
Yep. See, and I think that was one of the things that while I researched this that I didn't know, and I think Teresa Diaton's in the house tonight. Anyway,
Hey,
she said England and Ireland, and
yeah.
that's I think where most people look to see them because this is the place that they seem to find um,
Well, see, the
Druids.
one of the characteristics that they had is they used the OM or OGHAM script or writing, and the thing about OM writing is that that's associated with the Celts. But the thing here is that about 10 years ago, they found a statue that was buried in the permafrost in Siberia, like northern Siberia, and that thing had OM lettering on it,
Yeah,
which means
because
that they must have been over there too.
yes, and that's the thing is they were all over the place, and really we don't have any writings about them,
Mhm.
as because just
Well,
because.
their tradition was an oral tradition, and the reason for
Yeah,
that being is that all their knowledge was passed down from one generation to the next generation, and that was designed so that so that it was written down, and those documents could be captured by their enemies
yeah,
and eventually used against them or co-opted in some way. That was their way of making sure that their religion remained pure. The same thing in the old Slavic religions. They were also not written down on purpose. The
yeah,
problem with that was when the Christian colonizers came and they killed all the priests, they also killed the religion because
yeah,
there was
yeah.
nobody to.
There's always a flaw to everything in a way. Um,
Mhm.
what I was saying too is like from my research, I got in there and found that yeah, the Druids, those times they were more like tribes. They didn't have they were tribes within a giant tribe,
Mhm.
and so they were more. It reminded me of the Indians, except that they all spoke the same language, especially in Ireland and England, where they were, that was the last of them really, and they were hunted down at the end. But
Yeah.
Julius Caesar, he was the one that recorded most of that. And like you said, if you killed all the priests off, then you would, kill off.
You lose the continuity, and
Yeah,
that's
and
why we actually know very little about those people and about those times, simply because all those practitioners were the holders of that knowledge were eliminated.
yeah, and well, and the thing is too is that I read somewhere it said it took 20 years to become, a druid priest. 20 years, and I'm
That's
thinking, oh, holy
that's more
cow!
that's like a PhD.
Yes, 20 years to become a druid priest, and then it took. There was three levels of it too. So you had I forget what it was. It starts with a V, and then there's another one that starts with a B, and I can't remember the two levels. But then you master those two, and then you can become a full-fledged druid. So there's a lot of steps. Can you imagine? I'm going to spend 20 years of my life trying to learn how to do the job. Not here's take a couple classes, 3-4 years here in college, and boom, you're a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. Holy cow, 20 years of trying to memorize everything because you weren't writing it down.
Hmm. It was definitely a wiser system of leading society than we have today. Because, for example, today what do we have? We have elections every couple of years, and some person gets elected, some person with no real qualifications, who
Yep.
self-selects for the job, applies for the job, and from one day to the next, he becomes the supreme ruler of whatever country he's elected for,
Yeah.
president of. So that there's really no preparation for that as there should be.
Yeah. That is so true. And that's the problem with the Druids. they were scattered out. Did they have magical powers? I don't know, but I did find out in my studies of this that the Druids, like you said, they were all over Europe there, and in the beginning, they were the knowledged ones. They had I think their knowledge was their power. Even though they didn't have the writings of what was what, they learned it and they were knowledgeable, but they were also known for being warriors. These were
Sure.
the leaders, the warriors of their village, as was it kind of reminded me, like I said, of the Native American Indians, how
Sure.
the shaman or was almost level with the chief. They went to battle. Here's the chief, and there's the witch doctor, the shaman, whatever. He's right there with them. He's
See,
top
in
guy.
exactly, yeah. And in that picture that you have up, that's an oak tree, okay?
Yep.
And the oak tree was one of the trees that was sacred to the Celts, but it was also a designation of for the military, and that the military would wear branches or leaves of the oak tree to designate them as military. That's why, for example, to this day, the oak tree or oak leaves are one of the symbols of Germany. That's why it's on the old German Deutschmarks, and it was on the East German Deutschmarks as well.
Yes, but you know what druid means,
Yes,
and it does mean oak tree. It means oak,
it's
and
related to it. Yeah.
yes, it's broke down in the oak and something else, some knowledge thing or something. I can't remember the whole thing now. Told myself I wouldn't forget, but all I can remember now is it means oak and
Hmm.
wise or something like that, wise oak or whatever. But anyway,
Well,
the point is that they went out. That's why they're known even today as going out in nature, because I think they did their dealings in the woods,
hmm
probably under a tree, like this guy here.
hmm Well, yeah, it was sacred. It was sacred to them because that's also one of the hardest wood that there is oak or hornbeam or other related types of wood. They're also extremely hard, but that wasn't the only sacred tree. The other sacred tree that was reserved for was other ceremonial purposes was the linden tree, which has heart-shaped leaves, and the flowers of it also make a medicinal tea. But that tree, the linden tree, that was where they would hang all the criminals from. That's where they would
Ah,
execute people, and under the linden tree, that's where they would pass judgment.
yes, yes, and it's also the place too where, I mean, they say like King Arthur, and of course, where did he meet his merry men? Under the big giant oak tree. I've been there. I've seen the big oak tree. It still exists to this day, at
Hmm.
least in theory. But Robin Hood, and so with King Arthur, they had the big great woods, and all that stuff. And Merlin was supposedly a druid, or could have been a druid at that point.
Well,
Uh,
some people theorize that Merlin may actually have been a separate tribe of Celts.
oh, yeah, that could be.
Hmm.
There's, a lot of people are, speculating on what the Druids were, but now they're finding graves, and they're saying here are these guys that, they're buried, and they got swords and crowns and shields, and well, that's kind of odd. Where there was no king here. Well, was that a Druid king, or he would have been the closest thing they had a king for that tribe.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and how are the Druids wiped out? There's a story behind that too, wasn't there?
Yeah,
I'm not aware of
yes,
it.
I am aware of the story. But
You
do
want
you
to
know
tell
what
the
this
story,
picture? Do
Lucky?
you know what this picture is of?
What?
They're harvesting mistletoe.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Oh.
They
Mistletoe is sacred.
harvested mistletoe.
Oak
Hmm.
is
So,
Hmm.
sacred, nor of the oak, which is what Druid means, nor of the oaks.
Nowhere of
And
the
this is
oak.
the harvesting mistletoe, which is
knower
another
of the
sacred.
oaks. That's what it is. Yes, thank
Mistletoe is
Hmm.
toxic, but they made medicine from it because they knew what they were doing. Okay, what happened was there was a big meeting on an island because the Druids would meet on the island, and only Druids would live on this island. So the Romans, in their infinite wisdom, waited for the day of this meeting, and they just wiped them all out. And there was no priests.
Mhm.
How do you destroy a people? Well, you destroy the religious, and Druids were their religious. I mean, there was no one left.
Yeah.
Mhm. In a sense, they were a theocracy, kind of like the ancient Hebrew people.
Mhm. They were also known for this.
Burning Man, Wicker Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a movie like that, The Wicker Man. Yeah, they were known for making giant effigies to burn and put people, or burn people in the effigy.
Mhm.
That's Roman. That's Roman conspiracy theories. That's not true. The Druids never put people in them. They did
Really?
put effigies in them. They put symbols of people in them. People you were mad at, but because there was someone who studied this, and to
Yeah.
actually do this with people in them, you wouldn't. No matter what you did with Wicker, there's no way to keep the people in there, and it's. But the Romans, they love that story about the Druids burning people alive in the Wicker Man. It made a good thing to rally the other people against them, especially you know.
An early example of fake news.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Romans were great for that. The Romans were masters.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nice.
Julius Caesar, a master of. I mean, that's another story of itself. Julius Caesar was, you know, the Roman
Well,
emperors were scum. I mean, I'm sorry to the
Mhm.
Italians, but the Roman emperors, you look at them all.
Yeah.
Although Caligula was supposed to be all this bad guy, but he was loved by the people. So if you looked into it, maybe it was all made up that Caligula was so crazy and bad because he was loved by the common man so much. But again, that's from reading too much history.
yeah.
Ah,
Well, yeah. Well, that's
Nero,
true.
but Nero was hated by everyone. Everyone hated Nero. The people, the senators, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, this is the next thing. Everybody thinks about Stonehenge. I don't know. Have you been there?
no.
Have you been to Stonehenge? No, I have.
No.
I've been there. It's amazing. It sits on this big giant open field in the middle of nowhere, like. I mean, and there it is, all these rocks piled up. But everybody associates the Druids with the Stonehenge, but it basically says the Stonehenge is one of the most iconic places. But the scholars are unsure, and they may believe it was a religious site, but the Druids really don't have any part of it. It was constructed 4,000 to 5,000 years ago or more. I would say more. Um, but the Druids may go back further. But regardless if the Druids built this or not, the thing is that the Druids, um, they knew this was a special place, and they started, either they took it over, kind of like the Egyptians took over the pyramids, or they, knew that has power because it's in a certain spot, lines with movements of the sun and stuff like that.
What's interesting about it is that those trilithons, or stones set up in a pie shape, that's exactly the same as what you see at Göbekli Tepe, and that's also in central Turkey, which was one of the hubs of Celtic activity. So it's not far fetched that they may have built it, but since Göbekli Tepe has been dated to 12, 13,000 years ago, it's quite possible that this was built around that same time as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think a lot of these stone structures were constructed at a point in our history, just kind of like skyscrapers.
Hmm.
Right now in this 100 or 200 years, say we'll wrap it up at 200 years. In 200 years, we're going to build some of the most amazing skyscrapers known to man.
Hmm.
And
And they're worldwide.
yes, they're
The-
worldwide. They're pretty much all the same in some respects. And then what? Our society may die out or lose the technology, and all of a sudden somebody looks up there and goes, "How did they get the stuff way up there? Holy
Mhm.
cow! Who
But
built these things?"
yeah, the fact that they're worldwide would lead some future archaeologists to conclude that it was the same civilization that built them,
Yeah,
which it wasn't.
it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. Um, and yet, they all look the same.
Hmm.
So, who's doing these? And may have been the same architects building
Well,
them, but they were all different all over the
it's it's possible that the tallest skyscrapers may not survive whatever future cataclysm, but those huge apartment blocks certainly will, and those
Yes.
are also common all over the world.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, well, of course. And okay, so you can see here is another spot where they got stones. Now,
Just France?
huh?
Just France?
No, I would have. I don't know. But it didn't
They're
say.
all
I
over the
would.
place.
Yeah, they are.
They're all aligned.
France, England,
Hmm.
Ireland. You will find these stones all set up like this. I don't know if Dalibor. You've been all over the place over
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah.
You've seen these.
Yes, they are in Czech Republic as well. We
Yeah.
call them. We call them um, menhir. Menhir.
Really.
And that is
So
a term for like a usually for a single standing stone, but a couple of ones I've seen that were solitary stones like that were like huge, like these shards just sticking up out of the ground.
yeah, they just seem out of place, don't they?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I know when I took my trip to England, I never realized until that point in my life that these things were, all over the place there. I always
Yeah,
just thought, well, there's Stonehenge, and that's why it's so important. But once I started driving around and looking at things, I was like, holy cow, look at
yeah.
there's
There's
stones there, and there's stones.
yeah, there's Aylesbury. That's a well-known one. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I went to this little town, and the whole town was literally, at least the bar, a little pub I was in, it was all surrounded in a big stone, and there was a big mound out back, and it was really cool. The whole town was surrounded in stones, like
Hmm.
that's big stone circle. Yeah, so I thought that was cool. And
What's also interesting is that in most cases, in almost all cases, those stones are not native to the area that they're placed in.
That's
yeah,
yeah,
And
that's a big thing right there.
yeah, like with Stonehenge, those were moved just like the stones that make up the Great Pyramid. They were moved like 600 miles to get where they are. It's like the question is why? What special characteristics does that stone have in that particular spot? Why couldn't they have used a different stone?
yeah,
And which brings to mind, resonant frequencies. They have actually measured when they looked at some of these standing stones. They've measured radio waves emanating from them, just as they've measured radio waves emanating from the Great Pyramid and all the other pyramids, as well as not just radio frequencies, but ultra infrared and voltage. They're actually generating a voltage when you measure like the north side versus the south side. You get a voltage.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That setting these stones up in a certain way on a certain spot on a ley line, or where two ley lines convene or more,
Hmm.
you get this power. And maybe these people did these ceremonies there. Maybe they knew, or maybe they didn't even know, but they knew that something was going on there. My question is, was it these people that built these, or were they there from a previous generation, and it was passed down that that's a sacred site? And and since the stones are big, it'd take a lot of effort to destroy them. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? But that,
Probably a bit of both. Probably a bit of both. Like, uh, for all we know, we definitely know that they were important to them, which means that they knew something, and they must have known about telluric currents and the way they travel, because a lot of these so-called ley lines uh, travel in more or less straight lines throughout the countryside. So, and they place standing stones along those straight lines.
yeah,
So it wasn't random, definitely.
yeah, and it's always usually a special stone, not
Yeah.
just any stone. Not, hey, let's go, chip some stone out of the quarry down the street. Like you said before, They haul
Yeah.
these hundreds of miles.
Mhm.
It's always a special stone, like that one in the middle here might be blue granite. The other ones are white, bedrock stuff or something, something on that order.
Mhm.
There's usually they're usually really hard stones that contain quartz crystal or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
and usually they're granite, and granite is actually made up of three different minerals. That would be quartz, mica, and feldspar, and each of those has its own different resonant frequency. Uh, and but the confounding thing about it is the fact that granite is extremely hard to cut, even though, granted, they're not cut to precision. These
yeah.
standing stones, but the fact that there's so many of them, especially like in Western France, where they have like I think it's called, yeah, Karnak. Strange name too, because there's a Karnak in Egypt where there's literally 20-kilometer long lines of these standing stones that go into the ocean. And the question is, why are they going into the ocean? Well, the obvious answer is that sea levels have risen over the past 12,000 years since the receding of the ice cover from the north, from the global warming. So they say that sea levels have risen by about 60 meters from 12,000 years ago. So that would be appropriate, but which means that they led into the ocean. But why? Again, why?
Yeah, that's a good question. And,
Hmm.
and are people asking that? And of
Hmm.
course, you got these signs here like this. This is, if
The
you see this,
Celtic knot.
yep, you see these symbols like the Celtic knot, exactly. And that's an old symbol that goes back, I would assume goes back to the Druids, but why them? Why did they have that? I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, is there a science to this?
Well,
Uh,
the triangular one, that's reminiscent of the triskelion, which to this day is a symbol of the Isle of Man, which is an island between England or Scotland and Ireland. It's in the Irish Sea, and it's like an independent little country within the United Kingdom,
Mhm.
and that's like their symbol. But it's like a swastika, except that it only has three legs instead of four. So that's kind of unusual.
huh, yeah. Well, and of course, you have the tree. There's your oak tree. There's your oak.
Hmm.
Most people see the tree
The oak, yeah,
and they don't realize that this tree is the oak tree, the Druid path.
yeah.
And of course, I don't know, they got the symbol, the knot, the swirly
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah,
And
that's another weird thing, that spiral.
spiral.
Yeah, you see that spiral all over, like in megalithic geoglyphs. You see that even in the mound builders of North America. They made spiral mounds too. They put spiral symbols in stone and some of the megalithic areas and on some of the megaliths themselves. It's difficult to say what it could mean. I mean, it could presumably mean something like gravity, and that it spirals inward. Um, there's a couple of theories, but no real explanation.
Well,
But it's
then,
definitely it's also one of the Vinci symbols. Vinci being one of the oldest known alphabets in the world. That was discovered near a village named Vinci in Yugoslavia, and it consisted of, I believe, 42 different symbols that repeat throughout all of the ancient megalithic world, and that symbol is one of them.
oh wow.
Hmm.
And then see, that's the thing I kind of wonder about is you got like that symbol, but you find it all over the world. And is
Hmm.
that now here's a
And
thing that's kind of
like
weird
the
that
at symbol is very similar to that.
uh of a time gone just I this is a thought. This is just my opinion or a thought I've had. And you see these symbols that they have up there, right?
Hmm.
And the knot, the little swirly, the symbol, these other ones.
Hmm.
What if, in a time gone by, thousands and thousands of years, these were logos for companies?
That's another supposition that is a valid opinion. Yeah.
And you know, it's just like the Walmart. You know, hey, you know, you see the Walmart symbol, you know what it is. You don't even have to think about it much.
Or the
But
golden arches.
yeah, the golden arches. You know,
Hmm.
and you know, scientists dig it up. You know how many prints, papers, things of the golden arches there are, and if some of them survive, they'll
Hmm.
be looking at it differently. Like, oh my God, look at if everywhere
Hmm.
we go, there's this big gold, this big M symbol.
Yeah.
You know, were
It-
these people
yeah.
united with the M? This must have been one tribe. This
Yeah.
must have been a, you know, a way of communication. You know,
Or
people
they,
followed.
they if they find like the remnants of a Walmart store, they might even falsely conclude that it was like a house of worship, that it was like the temple of McDonald's, and that if they find some of the skeletons in the uniforms, they could be, well, they were wearing the uniforms of the high priest of McDonald's.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, you know, maybe we, to this day, we are looking at it wrong, you know, because we always associate these things. Oh, that had to be religious. That had to be the a word that sacred not thing. To me, I look at that and I think, well, maybe that was a, you know, corporate
Corporate
logo.
logo.
You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
why couldn't it be? You
Hmm.
know, why not? Uh,
It's just like, yeah, because you have hallmarks, right?
yep,
And hallmarks go back thousands of years, and each every artisan that created like different pieces usually had their own symbol, their own hallmark. It's almost like ranchers out west would have their own brand that they would put on their cattle. That
yeah,
would be difficult to alter into a different brand, or easy to remember, things like that.
yeah. I just went to. Here, hang on a second. I just went to a museum here a couple weeks ago, and I got. And you can see this. This is if I can get it close enough. The West cattle brands. It's on a notebook.
Yeah.
Cattle
Hmm.
brands.
Cattle brands, interesting.
Yeah, you know. So you're right. Look at those. Don't
Hmm.
they look like that could be? You know,
Hmm.
there's your symbols, man. One of them
Hmm.
survives, and they go, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" you
Yeah.
know,
When
who
in
knows?
reality, sometimes it's a ligature of like the initials of the guy's name, or uh, like in the case of the fictitious TV series Bonanza, where they had the ponderosa, which was actually a pine tree symbolizing the ponderosa pine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how crazy is a lot of that stuff? Anyway,
Hmm.
so here's another picture of that same spot we were looking at, but you can see all these stones and how they're arranged. The one in the middle, like you said, that could be a frequency.
Hmm.
You know, could some of these be added later on in the timeline? Absolutely,
Hmm.
I would think. But you know, then what if you were
See, that's the thing. This looks also like Göbekli Tepe, and we know that Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried.
Mhm.
It was buried. Now, what if this was buried too, intentionally? And what if the purpose of that was so people could stand on the individual stones and receive some kind of therapy?
yeah, yeah, or you know, maybe these these weren't buried, and you know, they say, oh, this part's going to survive. You
Hmm.
know, it's not inclined to get flooded or whatever, and they didn't do their part. They
Hmm.
didn't cover up their stuff, and then people seen this. And I'm sure after hundreds of years, this should have been buried, and it probably was. Somebody dug this all out.
Or
You know,
maybe it was buried, and because it was buried using different material, it eroded away over the centuries.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely, yeah. Because you can see how this spot in the back is more
Hmm.
buried, and this up
Hmm.
here is all clean, like somebody dug it out, cleaned it up,
Hmm.
kind of like
Yeah.
the Egyptian pyramids. What
Hmm.
you see today
Hmm.
is all dug out, cleaned up. The sand moved away because when you look at pictures from the 1800s of that place, the Sphinx's head is just
Mhm.
sticking out of the ground.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
the pyramids are half under sand. They,
Hmm.
you know, nobody they move tons and tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah, even the pyramids themselves
Yeah, exactly.
were like halfway under the sand. So
Yeah, here you got, these are just pictures I picked up. Like I said, the Druids were, um, known as leaders, in their little tribes,
mhm.
and maybe they were good orators and so forth and so on. And if you're a knowledge man, you know more than everybody else. Well, you would have the power.
Yeah.
Anyway, I see Nina the Mystics in the house.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, what's up, Nina?
I didn't think you were going to make it tonight.
I didn't think so either, but it's so damn hot out there. I could only take 4 hours, and that was it. I'm back home.
Yeah.
Well,
Good.
Good that you could join us on the. You just speak up anytime you hear something about you want to chime in on. Like I said, we're just kind of going through this Druid thing, trying to figure out what we're going to do, because tomorrow we're going to be on Sunday Live with our new book, Horns of the Goddess.
Yeah, so that's all about the Druids in there. So if you guys want to know more, like more intimately, of how it was like back in those days, that's exactly what we're going to be reading about here in our new series starting tomorrow. So tune in on my channel. Robert and I are going to start reading Horns of the Goddess by Dolores Cannon. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, I thought she passed away. Yes, she did. But she had some material that she had channeled back in the 80s that her kids have fished out and put together into a book. So it's a brand new book. It just came out here a couple of months ago. And it's all about the Druids and basically the Inquisition and, what the Druids went through. What how Christianity came about and what exactly happened, so it's gonna be very, very interesting, and I think you guys are all gonna enjoy it. So yeah.
Sounds interesting. Yeah, that ties in with what I was saying. That basically the migration of the Celtic people westward kind of follows the path of Roman expansion. That my theory is that they were basically moving away from the Romans to avoid being Christianized by force.
Yeah. Yes. They did. The Romans did not like the Druids.
No,
They did not like the Druids at all.
and they called them barbarians, and that was also another instance of you could call it almost demonization, fake news. I don't know, mischaracterization.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were being gaslit. That's the new
Gaslit.
word
That's it.
nowadays. Gaslit. Yeah.
hmm
There's so many instances in history of that.
hmm
Yeah.
They basically called anybody who wasn't a Roman a barbarian.
Mm-hmm. Just like the white men did when we came to North America, really, right? So, this is not something new. So,
But
I
and
know.
the one thing the Romans didn't have that the Druids didn't have versus the Romans is they didn't speak with one voice. I mean, even though their languages were the same, or especially in England and Ireland, they were still speaking that Celtic language. They didn't have a grouping like the Romans did. You were either Roman, you did what the Romans did. They had rules, laws, and you abided by them, and you fell under Roman rule. But the Druids, they were all in their little tribes, each one having its own rules and stipulations, their own little priest or leader, and you can't be king of 50 acres and call it good, especially when your neighbor over there is doing something similar to you, but he's got his 50 acres.
hmm
And you ain't going to come to his rescue because my 50 acres ain't been touched. I guess that's the united you stand, divided you fall.
It seems like the Celtic people were more decentralized, whereas the Romans were not only centralized but hierarchical.
Yeah.
It was a top-down society, whereas it seems that the Druids would have been much more difficult to conquer since they were decentralized.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Lucky, you live in a great area over there. Massachusetts area, that whole section there. Now they say that, a lot of Irish or, the Celtic people would have came there. I think, isn't a basketball team over there named Celtics?
Yes.
Yes. So that tradition, that heritage came. They even said, did you know that when Lewis and Clark went on their, voyage or their mission of discovery, exploration of discovery, Thomas Jefferson had secretly told them to be looking for Celtic signs along the way because they believed that the Celtics had journeyed to America long before and, established colonies or staked out land in the Americas. Is there any signs of that, stones or anything like that, in your area that you know about?
Well, it depends how you ask, but yeah, there's up about, well, on the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border, this thing called American Stonehenge, where there's a bunch of rock formations around this acres of area. They don't know where they came from. And they are relying to certain astrological signs. And the Native Americans, the Wampanoags, the Massapequots, what's the other one? They would never do anything like that. They didn't, putting rocks for that kind of thing was not a Native American. It was nothing to do with the Iroquois or anything like that. The tribes of the area, none of them would do that. That was definitely a European, a Druidic thing. And it was up north in Canada, something Brighteon the Traveler supposedly traveled to eastern Nova Scotia, Cape Breton Isle. And they believe they had some evidence there. That's one of the questions. Supposedly, that's what that island, southern part of Nova Scotia, is called. Oak Island. Oak Island. Oh my God! Yeah.
We see that.
Yeah, that mysterious Oak Island. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was one of their beliefs that Brighteon the Traveler traveled there, and he told. This was after the Vikings, so Brighteon the Traveler got information from the Vikings. And he traveled as a Druid, and just friendly kind of thing. Stayed for a while, came back again, and that was also fed to the Knights Templar, and that's why they came over. So supposedly Brighteon the Traveler's maps helped the Templars come over here and bury their stuff, which I believe it's all long gone. It's all in collections a long time ago that they always dug up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what they're digging up or were digging up a couple of years ago are just remnants of what was already there.
Exactly.
But it's still tantalizing. It's still tantalizing what they did find on Oak Island. I mean, but as to like Celtic, the only Native American tribe that has Celtic genes are the Native Hawaiians. They have actual, for real. They have Celtic genes. And some people theorize that that's why they had like such a unique society that was had all the trappings of a modern democracy for the most part.
Huh. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
There's also theories about that the Celts came over and settled in northern India, and they influenced some of the Indian beliefs. Not all of them, because India is a very hodgepodge of different beliefs, but some of them do align with some of the Scots and Irish belief systems. I forget, there was a book I read, it was probably about this thick, and that was also, it had stories about Stonehenge. About one thing was that there were two stories. One was Stonehenge was stolen from the Irish. Another story was Stonehenge was stolen from the Scots. And this historian's belief is that he thought that maybe the Irish and the Scots had something similar to Stonehenge, but they couldn't. They did it with wood rather than with stones, and that they influenced the different people, and they were hired to influence the on the Wales England border. The Welsh always found a way of coming ahead with the English somehow. So.
But it's interesting that in Hinduism they had tens of thousands of gods, but three main gods, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Krishna. Whereas in the Celtic tradition of my country, in Czech Republic, we also had thousands of gods, but three main ones, which was Svarog, Beles, and Shiva.
Mhm.
And Shiva, that sounds like Shiva, doesn't
It
it?
does. It does. And
Hmm.
we've been talking a lot about at my Native American Myths and Legends show is that you may not be able to track relics because relics disappear. They get traded. You're tracking artifacts. But just as today, I'm gonna take whatever I got here. I'm gonna take this, clothespin, right? Well,
Hmm.
these are only made in the United States. Well, I'm gonna take it to Europe. And then they're going to say, "Oh, look at that!" And they're going to thousands of years from now, they're going to test this wood. They're going to say, "This was made in the United States. It's made out of a pine tree from the United States. How did it
Hmm.
get here? Was
Yeah.
it trade? Were they worshiping this little page, this clip? This
Hmm.
clothespin or something like that? Was this highly valuable? You can't track that stuff very well. But what you can track is, like you said, language.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
language, mutates, but it always goes back. You can translate it back. The words sound similar because they get distorted as thousands of years go. But like you said, Shiva and Shiva, how do you, whatever. But
Shiva and Shiva, and also, well, you had Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right?
yeah,
And then there's also Krishna, which sounds like Christ.
yeah,
But the word Svarog, which was the main god of the Czech pantheon or Czech Celtic pantheon, Svar to this day is a word in both Czech as well as uh, one of the languages there. I think Sanskrit. Svar, and it means the same thing. It means great heat or welding, or and he was one of the his attributes was the sun.
yeah.
So
And so how you can't um manipulate. What's the chances, the coincidence that name would mean the same thing in two different places on the earth?
yes, two different,
You know,
radically different places and radically
yeah,
different locations. Which
just
don't forget that 20,000 years ago it was a lot farther than it is today with our modern
yeah,
transportation methods.
definitely. Well,
Back
the
then, back then you
go ahead.
basically had to walk it.
Yeah, and how do you get over an ocean, for instance? Like I was researching the Indians of Florida the other day, and they were talking about how each leader of the tribe was known as the sun, right?
Hmm.
So each leader was, and then there was one leader who was greater than all the other leaders. He was known as the grandson.
The grants,
Yeah,
interesting. And
you
this
know,
is the Seminole, right?
yeah, that area in
And
there,
the
along with
Seminole were also
the coast. Yeah,
are also racially mixed in that they accepted immigrants.
yeah,
They also accepted a lot of the freed African slaves.
yeah. But see, but the thing is the book that I was reading. It was talking about when the white man first got here, their first recordings. I love to
Hmm.
read those old books, and it's talking about these tribes I've never heard of, and it was talking about the son and the grandson thing, and a lot of these were just tribes were just destroyed or obliterated, after about 100 years, and so all
Hmm.
that knowledge was lost. But it does make sense when you start thinking they're along the coast. And if somebody from, a distant region like Egypt or Spain or, along those coasts who, especially Egypt, where the god was the sun god, he was a leader, he,
And he also had a ship.
yes. And what if he got and sailed across? Where would he land first? He would land on the coast, probably in Florida.
Yeah, yeah, good
Ta-da,
point.
problem solved. I mean, well, maybe not solved, but it is a good assimilation idea. Where how did that become? Why or how?
Mhm.
I mean, how to two different societies kind of have the same thing going on.
And the question is, like, was that travel intentional or unintentional? Did they intend to go there? Or did they know what they were doing? Were they escaping from something? Were they trying to start an offshoot civilization?
Yeah.
Or did they just was it just happenstance? They were out fishing, they got lost, the storm at sea, a 3-hour tour turned into Gilligan's Island.
Well, and it is proven that if you leave in a little rowboat from the coast of, the Europe or wherever, that it's possible to go across the Atlantic Ocean. I mean,
Yeah, except you would take the southern route and you would end up in Florida. Whereas if you were to go from the coast of the United States, you would take the northern route because the currents, they go
Yep.
clockwise.
Clockwise, yeah.
So you would end up in like England would be the first place you would hit, England and France.
Well, yeah, if you left the coast of North
Of
America.
United States, yeah.
Well, where would you hit if you left, the English coast, or maybe even like Egypt area, coming out of the Straits of Gibraltar,
You would head south and you would end up sooner or later, you would end up either in the Azores or Florida or Mexico. Mexico.
Which makes sense because
Yucatan Peninsula.
What do they worship there?
Yeah,
The
a feathered serpent. Not just that, but
serpent.
it was a feathered serpent who was anthropomorphized as Quetzalcoatl, which was a bearded man, a man with red hair. And not only did the Indians never have red hair, but they didn't have beards.
Yeah.
Which means that it must have been a European man, right? And
Yeah.
usually the only people with red hair were the Celtic people. I mean, there's quite a few of them in Ireland, and you don't see that many red-haired people elsewhere.
That is true. I mean, those Celtic people.
Well,
that guy that came there could have been a Druid.
Yeah.
Hebrews also have red hair. It's the Irish and the Hebrews. So there's two different groups.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting
my cousin married a Jewish guy, and he had bright red hair. It was one of those weird things. I forget which tribe, but yeah.
It's interesting that in my own family I have two family members that have bright red hair, like noticeably red hair, and one of them has green eyes too. That's kind of also an anomaly.
Yeah, so the Irish with the green eyes and the red hair, yeah, that's big.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, the Scots.
Here's your American Stonehenge. Located near the summit of Mystery Hill is a massive complex of stone chambers, walls, and large standing stones. Both radiocarbon dating and C14 and the placement of these astrological orientated standing stones indicate that this site was constructed at least 4,000 years ago, like Stonehenge of England. America's Stonehenge accurately deplots many solar and lunar events such as solstices, equinoxes, and well as many ancient holidays. There you go.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely, even though that's not megalithic, that's definitely a bit more primitive because you don't have that classical marshmallow stone morphology of those blocks. Those seem to be natural stones, just arranged that way. They didn't fashion them in any way like the classical megaliths are, like the Sphinx Temple in Egypt or
Yeah.
Ollantaytambo or places like that.
Yeah, yes, I agree. This is nowhere close to that. It's just that there are large stone. I mean, these little stones here, people could have moved.
Slipstone architecture, as they call it.
Yeah.
Slipstone, yeah.
Yeah, people could have put this together. Crew of guys moving these things. I could believe that could happen. This could be built. But
it could have been made recently too.
Yeah, I mean, in the last 1,000 years, yeah, I could see it happening. It is, not the megalithic smooth stone placed in the whatever, like Stonehenge or
Because
Or,
the other defining characteristic of megalithic architecture is that you can't fit anything between the stones. They say
Yeah.
that, for example, in the Great Pyramid, you can't even put a piece of paper between them, and that's true, because they're form fitted exactly to lock in with each other, whereas these are just natural stones.
yeah, I mean, it does look cool, but
Hmm.
I don't know. Lucky, have you ever been there?
Yes,
And what was your perspective?
interesting. There are some carved stones too, which there's a lot of questions. There's more questions than answers. Let's just say that. There are some
Hmm.
standing stones which I don't see any pictures of them, which is basically similar to the ones you said, which I asked if it was France. Big
Hmm.
Yeah,
up and down stones buried in the ground.
Yeah,
There are a few of
Karnak,
those,
France.
which mark the different solar events, or not solar, stellar events with the stars in alignment, stuff like that. But there was one
Hmm.
in the middle, a big slab on other rocks, and it's carved. That one right there. There's a carving in the center, and then it gumps to the side, and they believe that was a sacrificial stone, which is weird. Um,
Hmm. Like the woodland Indians of the eastern woodlands, they didn't perform
no,
human sacrifices, to
none of
my
this. Yeah,
knowledge.
none of this makes any sense for Native
Yeah.
American. So,
Hmm.
I mean, the only thing is not that one. That one I never seen that one. But yeah, it's an interesting site. Um, one of the guesses was it was the person who owned the land put these things together, but some of the stuff it just aligns too well, and he wasn't that bright. He might
Hmm.
have he might have made some stuff like this. Like the storage sections. He might have made some of those, but there are others where they're aligned for certain solar events, or it
Hmm.
doesn't make sense how the alignment
Hmm.
was so precise that how he was able to do that, unless he set it up on the certain days. They don't exactly know the whole story.
yeah,
Hmm.
I totally get that. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, it doesn't compare to when you start looking at Stonehenge
No,
here. I mean, these blocks here are humongous. I've been there, and they're huge. I mean, it is huge, and like you see here, there's
but
nothing out
they
there.
were also set up about 200 years ago too. A lot of
Yeah,
those were laying down,
yeah,
Hmm.
and they had to put them in place like that.
yeah. What
Hmm.
I there's pictures of in the 1950s where they're out there with excavators and stuff putting some of these back up. Otherwise, it would just be a bunch of stones laying on the ground. There'd
Yeah,
be nothing to really see.
yeah,
Hmm.
Like
exactly.
we talked about a little while before, is that after hundreds of years, these things get buried. They fall down, they get buried by the ground itself. Uh, and and then you have to dig it up, like the pyramids, the Sphinx, all of that. You have to dig it up in order to see what it looks like.
Hmm.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
it's also interesting the size of those stones, and that the stones are similarly sized to the ones used in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. That
Yes.
it's not bigger than or smaller. It's pretty much that same size. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1", and when I was at the Great Pyramid, each of those stones went up to my chest approximately, and it's about the size of like a minivan. So
yeah,
about that size.
yeah. And yeah, you just don't move those stones,
Hmm.
very, especially back in the
No.
day when you just got horse and wagon or buggy or, you know,
Yeah.
how do you move that? And then hundreds of miles? Ah, come on.
I'm
Yeah.
starting to believe the theory that they were probably cast in place using a technique that we still don't know to this very day, because they've been analyzed, and some labs have reported that it's actual cement.
Hmm,
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
that's
Uh,
interesting.
Yeah.
well,
That
what was it that we looked at? You were on with me, but we looked at the blocks in the Inca blocks,
Yeah.
and how they do the coating on them looks like stucco,
Yes.
and
Uh-huh.
they're all molded. They're just molded there, and the guy was showing how they start to break off in spots and pieces, and there might be a stone underneath, but maybe these things were like heated up like jelly or something and placed up there.
Or
That's why they fit.
or it's a geopolymer, i.e., a cement. I mean, they've also proven that the oldest known pyramid would be the one in one of the ones in Bosnia, in Visoko, Bosnia, one of the Bosnian pyramids. That those huge slabs are actually cement, and it's a better grade of cement than we're able to make today.
Yeah, that's why these things lasted so long. I think somebody said that they used volcanic rock in some of
Yeah,
that.
and if you look at the map of where the Celtic people were inhabited in Europe, Bosnia is one of those places.
Uh,
So,
so,
that's probably a relic of Celtic civilization as well.
so
Even
basically,
though,
study the architecture, study the things, and follow the people. And that's what they
yeah,
did. We moved across Europe, and
hmm
we follow their language because I was reading somewhere that the Celtic language is literally in all other languages. It's
yeah.
literally broken down in every single language.
But you
So
could
what?
say the same about any other language, in that all languages come from one source.
And that possibly could be,
Yeah,
but
and most likely
which
that
one?
source would be Sanskrit.
That's true. That is true. And which one? Yeah, that's a big question. Which one came first? And
hmm
as it broke down, it changed, and people moved away. And
And there's like tremendous similarities that are just striking. Like, for example, the Czech word for bird is ptak, Ptak. Now, there's an Egyptian deity with a bird's head named Ptah, right?
uh, yeah,
So it's like, don't tell me that's not related somehow.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, we learned a lot about uh, these druids today. I haven't seen many questions except for Scotty Boy said that something about the Hawaiians. I think I posted it up here.
Mhm.
But anyway, type S. Lee says type O negative be my druidness. Oh, I guess that.
Yeah, that's interesting that some people say that type O negative is somehow a remnant of the ancient ruling class. That basically the Druids were like the ancient ruling class of not only the Celtic people but other people. That they would travel around doing things like education, adjudicating court cases, stuff like that, teaching. So, or ministering to people, or I don't know, and that they would do this for other people as well, not just their own Celtic people.
Anyway, yeah, exactly. So remember, tomorrow night we're going to dig into this and Dolores Cannon. Nina, can you tell us what Dolores Cannon actually does? I mean, so that people have a good idea of what we're going to be reading about. I read the back of her book to everybody before you got here. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but like I said, it's you explain.
Yeah, so the way Dolores works, and that's with all her books and all her, everything that she does, she's a hypnotherapist. And so she's able to put people into a state where they can tap into channeling basically other people. Is what she's doing. That's where all her material has come from. And so she was able to tap in. I think there's 3 different people that are channeled in this book, and they were from this time. And so they're going to talk to us like they were there. So there's going to be a little bit of everything there. It's not just, violence and horrific things. There's also going to be some romance and some sex in there. And they're basically a day in the life of what it was like back then. So I think it's going to be entertaining, but it's also going to be educational, just to get a glimpse of what it was like, especially a reminder for everyone how Christianity came about, what they did to people back then, what we went through. Essentially, we were all probably back there at some point, right? if you
Mhm.
believe in reincarnation. And yeah, it needs to be, we need to be reminded of that, because I think people have forgotten, you know, what it was like. And so it's going to be a little bit of everything in this book. And so I hope that you guys can join us. We're starting tomorrow with the first episode. So 6 o'clock Pacific, that's 9 Eastern, on my channel, Nina the Mystic.
Absolutely. It's
Cool.
going to be a good time. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put the
That-
link again in the chat here too, so people can just go in there and like it, set them a reminder if you want to, and share it out if you don't mind, you know.
Absolutely. Yep, I posted it myself a couple of times here. But yeah, Dalibor, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say that one of the oldest artifacts that was discovered in my country in Czech Republic is of Celtic origin, and it's a head, and it's a very strange kind of a head, in that it's the head of a man with a mustache, just a mustache. The mustache is twirled. He's also got twirled eyebrows, and he's got braided hair, like braided like in multiple braids around the periphery of his head. And I thought that was kind of strange, in that that indicates high technology, which means they had shaving. Because how else do you get just a mustache without shaving off the beard? How did they do that? Did they have, high carbon steel like we do today? Like, what did they use to shave that beard off with, leaving just the mustache? You know?
Yeah, that is see, it's little points like that that people, the ordinary Joe, like myself, would overlook.
Yeah.
Back in the day before I started studying things,
Hmm.
that's one of those things you would just overlook because you're thinking mustache. Okay, great.
Yeah, we know that like the Romans had high carbon steel, and that a lot of them were clean shaven. A lot of Romans didn't have beards. They didn't. They shaved them off.
Yeah.
Well, we know how. Except that in ancient times, way before that, like we're talking thousands of years. Like, what did they use? What kind of techniques did they use to shave that off?
Well, you don't
Well,
see the Egyptians with beards either, do you?
Yeah, this is true. You don't see them with beards, but maybe they didn't grow beards like the Native Americans. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know either. I never thought of that.
No,
Mhm.
the ancient Egyptians shaved their whole bodies. They shaved their heads. Their whole
Okay.
bodies were shaved
That's
because
right. Yeah.
lice. They had a
Mhm.
big
Oh,
lice problem, so they shaved their
right.
whole bodies. So they actually, that's what the pharaohs had wigs and fake beards. It's
So shaving was obviously a thing then. So they must have had something. Yeah, I mean, even obsidian, if you make it like into a
Yep.
spearhead type of thing, it's shot and sharp. You could shave with that, I guess.
Yep,
I don't know.
that's
Yeah.
true. That's true right there. Yeah.
Except a napped edge is never straight. If you do napping, like if you look up the word napping, that's the technique that you use to make like a knife out of a sharp stone.
yeah,
That edge is never perfectly straight. It's always going to be like a sawtooth,
yeah, it's like a trade,
kind of like a bread knife.
traded
Mm.
knife. Yeah,
Hmm.
it never
And
cuts.
that's difficult to shave with. That's
Oh yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a weird. I never looked. I do know that they shave, but I don't know how they shave. That's a good question.
Well, I know,
Mhm.
like for women, especially you guys probably don't know, but us women sometimes will do something called threading.
I know
And
about
that's
that.
East
Yeah.
Indian. Yeah, East Indian thing. So they just use thread and you shape your eyebrows and you can get rid of your facial hair and everything. So that may have been another thing that they were using as well, back then, right? So it's not
Except that
always.
that's extremely painful when used on a male facial hair. I
Yeah,
mean,
I can imagine. Yeah.
yeah,
It is
because
painful for a woman too, but yeah,
mhm,
you're basically ripping the hair out. So,
exactly, yeah.
you know.
And I found this out on my own because my mom, she bought one of those epilaty things, and I was like,
Oh
hey,
yeah,
can
yeah.
I borrow that? I'll use it on my
Oh,
beard. And she's like, oh, no, I wouldn't recommend that. Try it on your arm first. And I did, and I was like, oh my god, no, no,
yeah.
not going there.
And another thing too, because I used to work in a hairdressing salon, and this East Indian lady was doing the threading, but she also had another thing called sugaring. And so they would make this sticky substance with sugar or whatever it was in lieu of wax. and you
Yeah.
would lay it on and then rip it off. So that's another. So they must have had a lot of these tricks back in the
Mhm.
day. And so they're bringing it back now. Actually, it's coming back into the salon now with these old ways of doing things. You know, yeah,
Yeah, sugar when heated, it caramelizes. It
right,
changes its isotropic form from white sugar into brown sugar, and it's sticky. And if you get
yeah,
it right, you can get it to be like a tarry substance. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
familiar with that.
Yeah, that's what she used. So she would make it. It's pretty cheap. You just got to get sugar and lay it on and rip off your hair, you know, instead of using the hot wax, which sometimes is
Hmm.
too hot and it actually burns you. So, yeah.
Hmm.
So there you go. Women have a way of figuring this stuff out, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. I don't
Yeah.
want
Yeah,
to
and
know. I don't want to
yeah,
know.
You don't want to know what we're waxing. That's right.
and you certainly can't do it with a brass knife or a copper knife. No,
No, certain
never
places, no,
gets.
no,
No.
no.
Well,
Hmm.
actually, I looked it up, and the ancient Egyptians used pumice stones. They repeatedly rubbed it on their faces, heads, arms, and legs to remove all hair. Pumice stone, that's crazy. And then they
Oh
also
man, you
used,
Oh,
would end
yeah.
up. That would be
Yeah.
horrible. I can't imagine rubbing pumice stone on my face to get rid of my
No.
facial on my
I
What
don't
you know?
think a
What that's
guy could do it. I think it's too rough for you guys. This beard is too rough for that. But on your
yeah.
arm, maybe you could. On your arm.
Hmm.
I
they
But
don't
what
know.
also
that what the
used splint blades too, and there's something else, and it's sugaring. They mentioned sugaring too.
Sugaring. There you
Honey.
go. Yeah.
But see, the thing with using pumice stone, I'm familiar with that. In that medieval monks would do that to their heads to get that bald spot on their
Wow.
head. But
Mm,
what the
mhm.
pumice stone does is it actually removes the top layer of your skin where the
Oof.
hair grows from. So you're removing the hair follicles themselves. You're actually
Yeah.
damaging your skin and replacing it with scar tissue. Not
Why would guys intentionally make that bald spot back there, anyways?
I I don't know. I don't know what
That
the reason
baffles me.
behind that is, but it's just as
It could have been marketing because a lot of guys, that's when male pattern body starts on the head. So
yeah.
Right.
maybe the ones in power said, no, this means we're sacred. We're more powerful. So the
Right.
ones
It's
Yeah.
who
like we all
couldn't
got
get
to do this now. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
exactly. So the ones who had a full head of hair go, hey, I want to be enlightened too. I'll shave
Right.
the top of my
Yeah.
head. I want to be one too.
Yeah.
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 Could
Yeah.
be. Could be.
That's what we did.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly they weren't into comfort a whole lot. If you just look at the clothing, I mean, can you imagine driving a car with like the people hat? You know, you
Oof.
can't.
Nope.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, wow. Yeah, that would be crazy. But anyway, um, well, it's gonna be. We're gonna find out a lot in this book here. It's a good book. I mean, it's gonna be fun to research this, and like I said, we might do some more shows on a little bit as I find out more information. It's really hard to find out good, solid information about Druids because a lot of it wasn't written down. Then they were all destroyed, and the most we have on the original ancient Druids is from the Romans and from Julius Caesar himself. There's another guy who wrote about the Druids all the time, but they destroyed all his work. So this book here might be the closest thing we have to knowing what was life like in the day and the life of the Druid people.
Yeah, well, modern neo-pagans, especially modern Wiccans, they trace themselves back to the Druids, except that that's based on the writings of a guy named Gardner in the 1950s. So basically, you know, you could say that Wicca goes back to the 1950s, because, like you said, a lot of this is conjecture. We don't really know what they were all about because they killed off all the priests. They
Yeah,
had no
Mhm.
writings, so we can only conjecture as to what they were all about.
yeah. And I'm sure there was some guys that survived, but did they get to actually pass down? Like you said, it was a dying religion after they killed off most of the Druids,
Hmm.
and after that, it was sinking fast because they were converting all these people to Christianity, and I'm sure that they were still trying. Was it they tried to go to who did they send over there to kill the snakes? And the snakes were the Druids.
St. Patrick. Yeah, St. Patrick.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because the church didn't want to have that other religion. They did, you know, and even today we adopted a bunch of those pagan type things from them.
Yeah, like the mistletoe, the
Yes.
Christmas tree.
Christmas tree,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
To
They
make it
all
all,
intertwine. Yeah.
yeah, to help those people convert. Plus, you know, it also rubbed off on all other people because just like you said, Dalibor, that the Celtics were there in your country and they influenced those people. So would have been pretty easy to adopt the Christmas tree because, you know, hey, it goes along with all the other religions that we conquered. Why not?
Sure. Yeah, and the fact that
Yeah.
they lived in our country means that they got along with our people, with the Slavic people. But they didn't obviously want to get along with the Romans. And when the Romans started expanding, they pretty much, did all they could to get away from them, going as far as the easternmost corner of Europe and the easternmost corner of Britain
Yeah.
and Ireland.
Yeah, when they ran out of places to go, the only
Yeah.
place was to get in a boat, sail over to America, and who
Well,
knows what happened to them at that point.
that's why it's literally called Land's End. That western tip of Cornwall. That's where the
Yeah.
land ends.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been to Cornwall there, and it's just the cliffs of Dover, or whatever the heck it is. It's just, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, they just drop off. But anyway, thanks for everybody for coming. 7P is in the house. Haven't seen 7P in a while. Scotty boy, Snakes Sugar, Mark the Arc Spark is in the house. Let's see who else is here. S. Lee. He said S. Lee says something about the Navajos and says the U.S. Navajos teaching the spiral on top of the head is where the spirit enters these meat suits. How interesting is that?
Crown chakra.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Delaney Pearl Jones is here. Frida and Hey Black is here. Haven't seen Frida in a while. Let's see who else we got. We had a lot of people here. Treso is in the house tonight. A lot of chatting going on. Regine Hutchinson in the house. Michelle Can-Am Free. And Steve Bow. And Witchy Moon. Witchy Moon came to visit us too. Oh, anyway. Thank you. And Gaza Cav made an appearance earlier tonight. And Big Justin. Anyway, there we go. A lot of people came in tonight, which is great. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Nina, for coming on and talking about the show tomorrow night. There'll be a link here in the comments. Right there it is. There we go. And you can find that link for tomorrow night. Go over there, put yourself, and YouTube will send you a notification. Dalibor, thank you for coming on.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for being my co-host tonight. And I hope that if you find any more knowledge on the Druids that we didn't review here tonight, and you bring it to my attention, we'll talk about it some more, because I think you're right that these Celtic people have been all over the world. Who knows? Maybe they started out in China and worked their way across and spread out all over the world, and we just don't know it. Maybe.
Well, it kind of ties in with my theory that the true cradle of mankind is probably Europe, and that's based on the environmental conditions. In that you don't have volcanism here, you don't have earthquakes here, you don't have hurricanes, you don't have tornadoes. There's no poisonous snakes. You don't have any large carnivorous mammals around here. In other words, if you go out in the summertime, like into the woods, there's nothing there that could kill you. We don't have any like poisonous plants like poison ivy or whatever that can affect you by just contact, and we don't have any poisonous insects. So no poisonous reptiles, no poisonous. Why? Because it's been inhabited for so long that the human habitation eradicated all those threats. So that's my theory, and that's my justification for it.
That makes lots of sense. It really
Mhm.
does. Really, really does. Um, anyway, okay. Nina, I will see you tomorrow night, and we'll
You
be doing
betcha.
this again. And I hope that everybody out there can join us for a great show tomorrow night and on Nina's channel. It'll be on Nina the Mystic, unless I can figure out how to figure it out to share it on my channel, because I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah, it was funny when I was on your show last time. I had an option of streaming on my channel as well. It's the first time I've seen that, but yeah.
I'm going to have to try to figure that out. Maybe I'll have to get on a little early and figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know if Melon offers that. That's the thing. You're on my Melon then, so
Yeah,
I don't know if they offer that.
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. Go out, do something nice. It's summertime. Go out and enjoy it, especially if your area doesn't have all that smoke in it, as we're experiencing here the last couple of days, and from all the fires in Canada. Nina, you can keep that fire smoke up there.
Yeah, apparently we had numerous more appear here. We had a thunderstorm, and so British Columbia is on fire apparently.
It usually happens this time of year. I usually
Yeah.
go to Montana camping or something in August or September, and usually by that time the smoke is so bad you don't want to be there because it's just it'll choke you.
Yeah, well, John from Max Vision was he's in that area where it's all burning in Ontario, and yeah, he was saying that he's getting smoked. Yeah, he's a couple of more months of this, and he'll be a sausage.
Yeah, I know. Last couple of days it's been bad here. Where you go outside, if you breathe too heavy, you're coughing and choking. Your eyes are burning, and yeah, it's not fun. Not fun at all. But anyway, remember, people, just go out, do what you can, stay safe, stay well, and be nice to your neighbor. Make a friend somewhere along the line, and be the frequency you want to receive. Everyone, love you all. Peace, everybody. And there we go, another show. Come on, the little squirrely things don't. It's taking forever tonight.